Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Appreciate your willingness to testify on this issue. Feel free to move forward and testify. Thank you.
Thank you and members of the committee. My name is Scott Burns. I'm the Deputy Director at the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy for State and Local Affairs. And I appreciate the opportunity to provide information to the committee regarding issues critical and of importance regarding this bill. As the members of the committee are aware, the administration has consistently followed the judgment of the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, that smoked marijuana is not an approved medicine. In April of this year, the FDA publicly reiterated its conclusion that smoked marijuana does not meet existing standards of safety and efficacy for modern medicine. In addition to the concerns over the lack of demonstrated medical efficacy of smoked marijuana and the well-demonstrated health risks, there is the further challenge presented by proposed state actions to the integrity of the drug approval process. By law, and for good reason, the FDA is the sole government entity charged in the United States, these 50 United States, with testing and approving new medications. Adherence to this system has played an important role in protecting Americans seeking treatment for illness. Prior to the creation of the FDA in 1907, Americans were barraged with a variety of claims about the supposed safety or effectiveness of a range of folk remedies and addictive substances. The majority of these so-called cures contained alcohol. Those who consumed it would, not surprisingly, report that they felt better after consumption. But these substances were not necessarily safe or effective. And in many cases, snake oil salesmen were simply hawking their products without the safeguards and protections that today, as Americans, we rightly expect from our government, thus the FDA. And that is why, over the last 100 years, a compact based on trust has been formed between the patient, the physician, and the government. The compact is this. A patient can expect that a physician will only prescribe a medication proven to be safe and effective, and both patients and physicians can expect that the government recognized medications have been determined to be only safe after properly rigorous scientific analysis, not political pressure and not deal-making. Americans have come to know that the FDA is required to engage in serious, rigorous, long-term clinical studies about the safety and effectiveness of medications. I think Mr. Murphy, the former Maryland official, cited the IOM study, and I encourage you to get that study and read it in its entirety. Ultimately, the IOM report concluded that the usefulness of marijuana for medical purposes is limited by the harmful effects of smoking, and that because smoked marijuana is a crude delivery system, and I want to emphasize that, smoking this weed has been determined to be a crude delivery system, that the verdict of the report was that marijuana is not a modern medicine. The Institute was particularly troubled by the notion that the crude marijuana might be smoked by patients, which it termed a harmful drug delivery system. Let me conclude by saying two things. The decision before Michigan lawmakers is an important one. It touches on two key issues: the question of how we treat illicit drugs in our society and how we determine what is and what is not a safe and effective medicine. With respect to the first issue, marijuana continues to be the most widely used illegal substance in America, especially among our teens. There are more young people between the ages of 12 and 17 years old in treatment for addiction to marijuana than for all other drugs in the body. For addiction to prescription drugs, for addiction to cocaine, for addiction to methamphetamine. Visit a treatment center, talk to a counselor about young people and the addiction to marijuana. The second issue is the integrity of our medical system. I would urge lawmakers to consider the medical system that we have fought to establish in this nation, and that it serves as a model for the rest of the world. Americans rightly expect a medication which has the FDA seal of approval to be safe and effective. Decisions made on the basis of politics rather than science and medicine violate the trust that forms the basis of the compact between the patient, the physician, and the government. It further turns 100 years of progress on its head. When faced with the question of whether to declare smoked marijuana a medicine by legislative vote, state lawmakers should reject that approach and instead renew their commitment to ensuring that decisions about medicine are based on data resulting from medical research and scientific inquiry. I thank you for considering this information, and I'll answer any questions that you may or may not have.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. A number of members of questions. Let me first ask, the FDA is in the proper process by which we determine whether or not drugs are safe and effective.
Yes.
Was Vioxx approved by the FDA?
Was what?
Vioxx approved by the FDA?
Yeah.
Thank you for being from the federal government and here to help.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would just ask you treat me with respect, and I'll treat you with respect. Is that fair?
That would be fair.
Thank you.
We have questions. Representative Lemons? You first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You mentioned that we don't make policy political. Wasn't the prohibition a political decision? Both the repeal of both prohibition and its repeal, weren't they in fact political decisions rather than medical decisions? And do you support the prohibition of alcohol, because we know that is probably more abused and more young people and more people abuse alcohol? That's the first question. And you say the second part is has to do with the alcohol content in medications, even over-the-counter medications, NyQuil, et cetera, et cetera. Doesn't the FDA approve that, and are those substances abused as well? Cough, we have children abusing cough medicines, et cetera, over-the-counter medications. And secondly, and finally, the vapor, you talked about smoked marijuana. What about the vaporization and other delivery systems that could, that technology today allows for purification and a better delivery system? If there was a better delivery system, do you think the FDA would remove its objections to it? If that's the primary objection to the ineffective delivery system, do you think the FDA would remove such a delivery system?
Well, I'll answer your last question first, and I'm not a physician or a scientist. And the gist of my statement was that in America, we rely on experts to provide us with those decisions. The FDA is made up of scientists and doctors that do studies. They have determined that the crude delivery system of THC by smoking this weed is not a safe and effective medicine. It's not. That there are other alternatives that have been determined safe and effective. And while testimonials by people that it makes me feel better may be relevant in part, they make that decision, the scientists and the physicians in the FDA. With respect to prohibition and the whole alcohol issue, look, we know in all 50 states the trail of tears and death of young people that have become addicted to alcohol, and the families and the ravages. I don't think there's probably anyone in this room that hasn't been touched by someone they know that abuses alcohol. But there are 126 million people that regularly use alcohol in this country. There are currently only 19.1 million people illegally using controlled substances, drugs that the federal government has said are illegal, or using them in an illegal fashion. So why would we try and repeat the trail of tears by comparing one social ill to another and say, well, you know, alcohol's terrible, why don't we legalize smoking crack cocaine?
No,
makes me feel better.
Well, actually, cocaine is legal under a doctor's prescription. That's correct? Cocaine
under certain circumstances,
right. So a doctor can prescribe if he thinks cocaine is bad, and morphine, etc. So those things already exist. But a doctor cannot. But there are a lot more. You would agree that that cocaine is far more addictive than marijuana, biologically addictive, because you use the term addictive. Maybe it might be psychologically addictive, but I don't know if marijuana is actually biologically addictive. What is the? I lost my train of thought. So go ahead.